Welcome, everyone. This is DS29, and here comes the panel. This is DS29, engage and monitor progress in implementing the Post-2020 Mediterranean MPA Roadmap. And I just want to give a few introductory words here. So you may remember when I was the Master of Ceremonies yesterday, I mentioned that I had an experience as the head of the Protected Areas program at the UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Center. Ah, hello. When I was in that role, we developed the Protected Planet Initiative, which is about the World Database on Protected Areas. It's a global monitoring system. And I understood through my experience in that role, the difficulty of trying to get numerous institutions to work together to make interoperable monitoring systems and to understand what you may want to do everything, but in the end, you end up with something that is achievable. Monitoring can be quite challenging, like many topics around marine protected areas. But I learned some important lessons about how to get institutions to work together in particular. So then when I was asked to be the main consultant on this Marine Protected Areas Roadmap, one of the tasks that the sponsors gave to me was to have a section in the new roadmap that talks about the progress made since the last roadmap. So I tried to do that. And I failed because there was no monitoring program after the last roadmap. And there was only some surveys that had some information that was useful for some of the content from the old roadmap. So I was unable to do it. So we thought about this and thought, well, if we're going to do this another roadmap, we need to have a much more robust system for finding out, to tracking progress. If we're going to go to all the trouble of developing a roadmap, we'd better find out if it was actually effective or not. Because if not, then maybe we're just doing this in entirely the wrong way. We need to, carefully look at how, at the work that we're doing. And if we're doing a roadmap, then, we better find out if it's useful. Was this a useful exercise? Was it worth all the time and effort? So we developed this section of the roadmap called the Road Ahead. We've pre-identified the need to have some kind of monitoring and implementation mechanism. You're going to hear in the session today some ideas on how this might work. These are just early ideas still, so we're completely open. This is a very open process, trust me. Nothing is written down in stone quite yet, so we're very open to ideas. We're going to hear from Suzanne Gallon and Souha from SPA-RAC, and they're going to tell us how this might work and how it could be aligned with the Barcelona Convention strategy. And the way it's worked in the past, some of the other data collection efforts that have happened related to the roadmap or related to processes related to the roadmap. And then we're going to hear from an example in the Pacific Islands, from the Pacific Islands Roundtable. And the person presenting, we'll hear her voice, but she's not actually here, it's recorded. And then we have a panel, and I've already shown most of them, not all, a set of questions that they can answer and I'll give them some minutes to respond. And they're welcome to either answer specifically the questions I've written down or whatever they want to talk about. It's an open panel. If you have a different idea about what you think is useful to share, then please do that. So that's what we're going to do. So that's my little introduction. And I guess I skipped over this logistics for the people who are online. Sorry about that. But if you need interpretation, please press the interpretation button on the bottom of the Zoom and change your name, if you haven't already, to your full name. This is being recorded, and mute your microphone when you're not speaking. We will have some time at the end for feedback from the participants. The other thing I would note about this session, this is different than the others, almost all the others specifically refer to roadmap recommendations, and this one does not. So we're not asking for specific wording changes or actions. This is a bit more high level and open in terms of how we're managing it. If you want to take the floor, on those of you on Zoom, do the raise hand function. And anyone is welcome to provide comments and questions on Zoom chat box. We have people who are monitoring that. Okay, that's it from me. So I'll turn this over now to Susan and Souha. I don't know who's going first. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. C'est la même présentation, s'il vous plaît. Non. Ça s'appelle DS29, session-présentation. DS29, session presentation. Yes, merci. Yes, here a small overview on the background and the context of the elaboration of the previous roadmap for MPAs and this very roadmap that we are trying to finalize during this forum. So, yeah, it's better. Okay, so the roadmap and forum process started in 2012 with the Antalya Forum and the first roadmap for Mediterranean MPAs that was aiming to achieve the ASHI Target 11 in the Mediterranean. So this first roadmap undergoes an evaluation in 2016, kind of midterm evaluation. It was the second forum of Tangiers. And an evaluation, a final evaluation in 2020. This evaluation was also the starting point for the elaboration of a post-2020 roadmap. So these roadmaps, the previous one and this one, are in line with global commitments, the ASHI targets previously, and now the post-2020 GBF, Global Biodiversity Framework of the CBD, also Sustainable Development Agenda and SDG 14, and other important targets. The roadmap and forum process are also linked to also a joint action that SPARAC and MedPAN are doing together. And this is the MPA status report that has the same periodicity as the forums, 2012 status report, 2016 report, and now we are finalizing the 2020 status report of MPA based on MAPA-Med data, geographical data, and also on management data from the MedPAN database. The last and most important point in my view is that this roadmap is complementary to the strategy developed under the Barcelona Convention for Marine and Coastal Protected Areas and OBCMs, and that is expected to be adopted next week in COP22 of Barcelona Convention in Antalya. This roadmap is kind of a support to the implementation of the strategy, but at various levels, going from national to local, and also including a larger kinds of stakeholders that maybe are not aware of the processes going on in under the convention and others. So we see a lot of complementarity between these two tools, and this roadmap supporting the strategy.
You will have heard yesterday during the plenary that there's something new about that roadmap, that 2020 post roadmap. We want it to be a lively document, a document updated by all stakeholders in the Mediterranean, and we want to be able to assess its progress through time. We don't want to be there every 4 years and assessing every 4 years how well we have done, and then realizing, as Charles pointed out, that we may not have the right tool to assess where we stand now. So we're going to try and anticipate and prepare the road ahead and figure out now what we need to not be in the same situation in 4 years. And I think that maybe first we should have chosen a better title for our session today to engage more people, because the whole target is to engage more, all of you, into that process. So maybe we should have named the session Free Cakes and Drinks, and maybe there would have been more people. I think maybe the roadmap implementation was not sexy enough. So this mechanism that we have in our head, that is nowhere else so far, and that we want to discuss with you today and with the panel, we would like it to be based on existing database and whatever is already out there, all the information that is out there. As we said, the most important thing is that we want to involve all of you. We want to find a way that people update, say how they are, in terms of their commitments, and not in 4 years, but maybe yearly, how well they're doing, if adjustments need to be done or not, so we can address those needs before the 4 years, if we can. Talked about an online system. There's like a voluntary commitment repository at the UN SDG 14. Is it something like this that we need? Maybe yes, maybe not. And also it needs to be, as Souha already mentioned, in line with other monitoring framework of the Barcelona Convention. So I'm going to give back the floor to Charles, but before that we might see that presentation from Anne-Claire. Anne-Claire GOARANT works on the Pacific, other side of the world. They have a similar process of a round table, getting stakeholders together for the strategy for marine protected area in the Pacific. So she's going to talk about all that, because they're actually asking the same question that we are doing here today with you. So she shared with us where they are today, and we hope to take that for us today to feed the process. Thank you. So, pour les techniciens, vous allez pouvoir lancer la présentation PowerPoint avec le son. Merci.
Chargée de projet et changement climatique à la communauté du Pacifique, et je vais aujourd'hui vous partager l'expérience de la Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Anne-Claire GOARANT, je suis chargée de projet et changement climatique à la communauté du Pacifique, et je vais aujourd'hui vous partager l'expérience de la Pacific Island Roundtable for Nature Conservation dans le Pacifique et vous présenter le plan de mise en œuvre et le plan de suivi 2021-2025. So the Pacific Community, the Pacific Island Roundtable for Nature Conservation, PIRT, is a coalition of nature conservation and development organizations, governments, intergovernmental donor agencies, and community groups created to increase effective conservation action in the Pacific Island region. It was established in 1998 at the request of Pacific Island countries and territories, which was voiced at the 6th Pacific Island Conference on Nature Conservation and Protected Areas in 1997. Its vision is healthy oceans, healthy islands, healthy people. So PIRT is a membership-based network committed to support governments and civil society in Pacific Island countries in their efforts to sustainably manage and conserve the region's biodiversity. 14 members signed a PIRT membership agreement. It's Conservation International, IUCN, Society for Conservation Biology Oceania, Climate Change Pacific, SPREP, the Nature Conservancy, Wildlife Conservation Society, the World Wildlife Fund, University of South Pacific, BirdLife International, GIZ, Protected Areas Research and Learning Collaborative, Pacific Community, Pacific Island Development Forum, and SPREP acts as a permanent secretariat of this roundtable. So the forum enables those organizations working on nature conservation in the Pacific to improve their collaboration and coordination towards effective conservation action around 9 principles. So these 9 principles are, you can find the specific detail on the website, but it's support a Pacific approach to conservation, respect and encourage national and community. So PIRT members are committed to promote, facilitate and monitor progress regarding the framework for nature conservation and protected areas in the Pacific. Nature conservation programs in the Pacific Island countries and territories are all guided by this regional conservation conference that has met every 4 years since 1975. It has become the principal gathering of stakeholders concerned with conservation science and practice in the Pacific. It's an excellent platform to set a Pacific-based and initiated agenda for Pacific conservation. And PIRT is a key coordination mechanism for the implementation of the framework for nature conservation and protected areas in the Pacific Island region, 2021-2025, and the coordination of the conference. In this context, we can ask the question, these 2 questions. How can we monitor a regional non-legally binding plan? And what can we monitor? This is questions that are shared with you. So the Pacific Island Framework for Nature Conservation and Protected Areas is the principal regional strategy document for environmental conservation in the Pacific, as said, and it reflects the urgent need for transformative action in response to the multiple accelerating threats, both established and emerging, that are faced by nature and people in the Pacific. The framework identifies the key regional priorities for action that are needed to make progress toward the 30-year vision for conservation that were adopted by Pacific leaders in 2022. What are the steps for what have been the steps for the endorsement of this framework? So a draft has been prepared following a review of the previous framework and an extensive regional consultation process throughout 2019. Feedbacks from all conservation stakeholders have been requested and primarily focuses on the 6 strategic objectives and the 21 action tracks of the new framework. The Conference of the Nature Conservation commented on the draft framework, and the framework was finally adopted at the 10th Pacific and Nature Conference in 2020. Following the conference, the draft framework has been updated to reflect feedback received during the conference, and the text has been endorsed by the SPREP Governing Council in September 2021. So there are 6 strategic objectives for 2020-2025 contribute to progress toward this 30-year vision. So these are, as you see on the slide, the first one to empower our people to take action for nature conservation based on understanding of its importance for our cultures, economies, and community. The second one is related to the integration of environmental and cultural consideration into economic development. The third one is to identify, conserve, and sustainably manage nature. The fourth one is to protect and recover threatened species. The fifth one is to manage and reduce threats to Pacific environment. And the last one is to grow Pacific capacity and partnerships to effectively monitor, govern, and finance nature conservation action. So each strategic objective, as you see, is accompanied by action tracks that are representing priority areas for implementation and which reflect the key themes of discussion at the 10th Pacific Island Conference. This framework provides overviews of best practice as guidance for work undertaken within each action track by Pacific Island. So the steps for the implementation. So the framework includes also notes on the various responsibility of stakeholders in its implementation, on its governance arrangement, and on monitoring and reporting. Recognizing the importance of alignment with other multilateral instruments and agreements, strategic objectives are linked to key global environment and development frameworks. Implementation of framework is primarily the responsibility of governments, supported by the members organizations of the PIRT and other regional and domestic conservation partners and funders. Strategic objectives provide a coordinated strategic approach to conservation across jurisdictions in the Pacific region. Decisions around national goals, targets, and indicators for their implementation are the responsibility, as said, of Pacific government. So, the scope of this implementation and monitoring plan is limited to the collective work of PIRT members and working groups. It does not provide guidance on the implementation of the framework by parties external to the roundtable. Note that several of the planned activities do involve provision of such guidance to key stakeholders across the region and advocacy for strengthened implementation by these stakeholders. The plan identifies 3 key strands of work for the roundtable. Each strand of work is accompanied by details of planned initial activities for 2021-2025, which has been identified by PIRT as priorities for consolidating and strengthening the work of the roundtable. So as you see, strand 1 is on collaboration to influence the conservation development agenda. 2, collaboration to guide and influence conservation action. 3, the collaboration to secure sustainable funding for conservation. And you can see below, extract from the annual work plan, which details the constituent task of each activity alongside designated responsibility and time frame for completion. So the broad strategic nature of the framework makes measuring progress significantly more difficult than for many other environmental agreements. And the 2021-2025 framework deliberately avoids establishing quantifiable targets, considering that this is the right and responsibility of Pacific Island countries and territories as part of their engagement with the CBD and their own national planning processes. It is also considered that capacity constraint would inhibit the establishment of a set of regional conservation targets and indicators accompanied by their own monitoring and reporting regime, since producing national report to the CBD already constitutes a major burden of work. Establishing systems for measuring progress has been an enduring challenge for all previous Pacific conservation frameworks. The environmental monitoring and reporting systems of the Pacific have evolved a lot in the last 5 years. For example, the project Inform has produced a set of core national environmental indicators to help Pacific Island countries and territories meet their existing domestic and international reporting obligations. They have been designated to be repeatable and are the foundation of the State of Environment and Conservation regional report. As the SOC is produced at the same 5-yearly intervals as the framework, it makes sense to consider it as the monitoring mechanism for the framework. The next framework review, planned for 2025, should include a qualitative assessment of progress on the 6 strategic objectives based on the time series trends revealed by the Inform indicators in the update SOC and with other relevant regional datasets. This assessment can be included in the SOC and will be a flexible and adaptive approach that considers emerging as well as existing environmental datasets and metrics. Strengthening the explicit linkage between the SOC and the framework will be a key priority in the early stages of the next review process for both documents. Optional additional approaches for assessing progress include compilation and analysis of national reports produced for the CBD if desired. This analysis will need to be resourced appropriately. Monitoring of the work of the peer members and working groups will be done through annual reporting templates and will be presented to each peer annual meetings. This monitoring will demonstrate the value and importance of our collective work to our regional and international partners and stakeholders. It is important for each member of the peer to self-report first on their alignment to each of the principles. So a summary of key trends from this reporting will be provided to each peer annual meeting and will be useful as we seek further collective funding for peer in the coming years and for own reporting. Self-report will be done also on programs aligning to framework strategic objective. This will be included in the peer annual meeting report in line with previous years, and all other information will be treated confidentially. Self-report will also be done on relationship with peers and questions as how could the peer better support your organization to collaborate with other peer members, or is there anything else you would like to contribute to peer will be asked. And specific monitoring for working groups, numbers of members, communication and meetings, existence of database, level of engagement and tools to improve it, details of collaborative activities undertaken will be done. So for the indicators, peer has produced a set of core national environmental indicators for 3 main purposes: to help countries and territories meet their existing domestic and international reporting obligations, to be the foundation of the state of environmental conservation, to be the basis of the monitoring mechanisms for the framework, and it will be clearly distinguished between the right and responsibility of countries and those of coordinating bodies. This implementation and monitoring plan takes a strategic targeted approach to engaging with peers, external stakeholders and partners using the strengths of our various internal groups. The primary stakeholders are the Pacific environment and the communities that depend on them. External partners are a range of agencies, organizations, and other groups with influence over conservation outcomes in the Pacific. And mapping these external groups allow us to focus our collective work program and identify potential future partners to build working relationships with. Peer internal group are members and working group. And finally, the coordination team consists of the peer chair, secretariat, coordinator, young professionals who will be recruited in 2022, and communication support. As you see on the slide, a brief analysis of the opportunities and challenges experienced by peer internal groups has been done in late 2020 and has informed the development of our work plan. It focuses on the internal strengths and challenges and the external opportunities and challenges facing peer members in their work as a collective. So in conclusion, the roundtable itself does not implement the framework, but its member and partner organizations do. The roundtable will report on the implementation of the framework to governments in the Pacific Islands region through SPREP and SPC annual meetings. The roundtable serves as a venue for bringing strategic oversight to conservation in the region, while providing a forum for accountability, transparency, and coordination for conservation organizations and donors. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, so next, can we go back to the people in the working on the technical side of this? Can you please go back to the first presentation we were looking at, the DS29 session presentation, please? No, this isn't the right one. It's DS29 session presentation. I added slides and they're not there. It's on fine. They're not connected to each. Oh, they're doing that. I just thought it happened other than. Okay, so we're making sure we have the right version. Let's see. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so just to come back to what we're here to do, let's look again at this road ahead slide. This was the slide that was being presented in the introduction. This is the state of the thinking on this topic thus far, to establish a review mechanism based on existing databases, gathering existing capitalization and review processes. So it's not about developing a brand new monitoring program, but it's rather to kind of integrate other systems when possible. Perhaps there would have to be some new data collection. It would encourage stakeholders at all levels to provide regular inputs at least once a year. And this could be an online system similar to the UN SDG 14 voluntary program. And then this would have to be developed in synergy with the monitoring framework for the Barcelona Convention strategy. So we have a panel, but I just have actually one question that I want to start with, because some of you may already be wondering about this. So I'll ask this question to Souha. If you wouldn't mind, here, I'll give you a microphone. The question is, how do you see this working around the Barcelona Convention strategy? Because it says that it would be done in alignment with that, but just reassure us that we've thought this through and that it's possible, because we understand the monitoring system that would be developed around the strategy is going to happen in the next time period, and then it would be adopted at the next Barcelona Convention COP, which is in 2 years' time. So how do we make these two things work together?
Yeah, yes, this is true. At the Barcelona Convention level, we started, we made the choice of adopting the strategy first this year, the COP of next week, and to wait until the CBD targets are definitely adopted, and that we have more visibility on all the ongoing processes, and to develop a monitoring, an evaluation and monitoring framework during the coming year, 2022, and having it adopted at the Barcelona Convention level by 2023. Although the parties wanted to have the midterm evaluation on 2025 and not to wait until 2027, because we are delayed, we are post-2020. We're already engaged on the post-2020 era, and we are still thinking on the strategies. Concerning this very roadmap, I don't see it replicating, actually. To be frank, another monitoring and evaluation system. I see it linked to the Barcelona Convention evaluation monitoring system. It doesn't make sense, at least for SPARAC, because we are on both sides. So it doesn't make sense at all to make work twice. I see it also very well linked to the work that we are doing together with MedPAN, this MapAMed database, this status report that we are producing every. So I see the formal thing and the thing that states should report on, maybe should be part of the Barcelona Convention. And I see a voluntary thing, because it's more, it's easiest to have people do things voluntarily than to make people report, because they should report to comply with the convention. It's something in the human nature. So I see two things that are complementary. A voluntary mechanism like the SDGs platform or something under this collegial roadmap and happy roadmap, and something more strict and more formal under the Barcelona Convention. And both mechanisms could communicate and feed each other.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can hand that back. Well, why don't you keep that there, Souha, because someone else may have a question for you from the panel. We have other microphones here. All right. So I would like to introduce now the panel. We have Imen Melian from IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. We have Leonardo Tunesi from ISPRA. We have Laure from OFB in France. And we have Constance from FEFEM. And we have Mustafa Fauda and Samia. Did I miss your name there? Oh, sorry. Samia. Welcome. Welcome to the panel. And then I have some questions here for the panel. Dr. Fauda. No, I think I said your name. I did. But then I mentioned that Samia was there. So welcome, Dr. Fauda. All right, so we have some questions for the panel. I don't know if you can see those okay. Can you see them? I'll just go through them quickly. So these are voluntary questions. You're welcome to consider these questions when you make your comments, or you may wish to say something entirely different. It's up to you. And let's go, let's see, what time is it? 16:49. Let's go about 3 minutes per person. And I'll have a little stopwatch here to make sure we have enough time to also at the end have maybe questions coming from Zoom. So let's try to go 3 minutes. Laura has volunteered to go first. Thank you so much for doing that, Laura. Yes. So over to you to share your thoughts.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I think I'll switch into French. It'll be easier, and I make sure I speak only for 3 minutes. Sur cette question du suivi et de l'évaluation et aussi de l'engagement des parties prenantes, j'ai eu 2 réflexions peut-être à partager avec vous. La première, c'est quand j'ai lu le projet de roadmap, il y a quelque chose qui m'a marqué, c'était écrit, l'objectif, c'était de faire less is more. Et je pense qu'en matière d'évaluation et d'indicateurs, c'est important aussi qu'on puisse avoir cette idée en tête de quelque chose de très opérationnel, peut-être qui ne sera pas exhaustif, mais qui permet en tout cas à tous les participants de se sentir en capacité d'apporter des éléments qui montrent les progrès qui sont effectués dans chacune des aires protégées, quel que soit son statut, quel que soit son niveau d'avancement, de gouvernance ou de protection. Et donc peut-être avoir une base commune d'indicateurs simples, mais qui permettent en tout cas à tous de pouvoir y adhérer. La deuxième réflexion que j'avais, c'était par rapport à la notion d'engagement des parties prenantes. Et à ce titre, partager peut-être avec vous une initiative que l'on a mis en place depuis à peu près 2 ans à l'Office français de la biodiversité. C'est un dispositif qui s'appelle « Engagé pour la nature », qui n'est pas spécifique au milieu marin, mais qui vise en fait à travers 3 programmes, le programme Entreprise engagée, le programme Partenaires engagés et le programme Territoire engagé, sur une base volontaire à accompagner donc des entreprises, des collectivités, des associations, qu'elles soient sportives, culturelles, de jeunesse, à mettre en place des actions très concrètes en faveur de la biodiversité. Et donc, voilà, je trouve qu'à travers ces dispositifs-là, en les liant aussi avec tout le travail qui est fait au niveau des aires marines protégées et des gestionnaires, on peut aussi voilà, déclencher des changements de comportement. Et je pense que c'est un petit peu ce qu'on vise à travers ça aussi, c'est faire en sorte que chacun puisse, à son échelle, à son niveau, se sentir concerné, engagé. Et donc, ce dispositif, on souhaite, alors actuellement, par exemple, sur le dispositif entreprise engagée, il y a à peu près 150 entreprises françaises qui sont engagées. C'est adossé à un dispositif international qui s'appelle Act for Biodiversity, non, Act for Nature, pardon. Et l'idée, du coup, ça serait d'approcher les compagnies maritimes, que ce soit les compagnies de croisière, les entreprises qui travaillent dans les secteurs portuaires ou de transport maritime, à mettre en place des programmes d'action volontaire et qu'on puisse essaimer aussi ces actions dans les pays où ces entreprises sont aussi implantées. Et donc, ça pourrait être une contribution de notre part, en tout cas, d'aider à faire ce retour d'expérience. Si d'autres territoires, d'autres acteurs souhaitent travailler sur ces dispositifs-là à travers la coopération décentralisée, par exemple, entre collectivités, ou à travers des entreprises qui sont implantées dans différents pays, eh bien, pouvoir voilà, mettre à disposition les outils et les éléments existants pour accompagner aussi voilà, ces programmes qui sont donc des programmes avec des plans d'action concrets qui sont évalués, qui sont labellisés et qui, s'ils ne répondent pas à des critères précis, ben, ne sont pas reconnus. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura. Constance, are you ready to respond? Thank you.
Bonjour, je m'exprimerai en français. Merci pour ceux qui sont là et ceux qui nous suivent. La question, j'ai 3 minutes pour répondre à une question très c'est un peu le millefeuille. Le suivi et évaluation, ça se passe déjà à un niveau très, très variable, du plus local au plus global. Si on pense aux observatoires de l'environnement et à tous les systèmes, même MapAmed, qu'on peut appeler un niveau extrêmement global par rapport au niveau gestionnaire d'AMP. Donc déjà, il y a le millefeuille du niveau d'évaluation et de la responsabilité de qui évalue quoi. Et puis, il y a le type de suivi et de monitoring qu'on veut se donner à faire. Et il y a beaucoup de types de suivi, non seulement le suivi pour une meilleure connaissance, et ça part d'un état zéro. Si on veut suivre quelque chose, il faut un état zéro, une baseline. Donc, il y a cette idée de dynamique du suivi à partir d'un état zéro et avec des indicateurs. Mais il y a aussi quel type de suivi? Il y a le suivi écologique, il y a le suivi socio-économique. Le FEFEM appuie toujours des projets qui cherchent à concilier conservation et développement local. Et puis, il y a le suivi de l'efficacité de gestion, il y a le suivi pour les AMP de l'effet de réserve. Donc, on a un millefeuille aussi de type de suivi. Et puis, au-delà de ça, on a un millefeuille aussi d'acteurs, engager tous les acteurs. On a entendu Souha nous dire qu'il fallait engager tous les acteurs dans ce suivi. Donc maintenant, on me dit comment suivre le progrès de la mise en œuvre de la feuille de route. Donc, on se retrouve avec un triple millefeuille. Donc, on se retrouve avec quand même beaucoup de feuilles à sortir. Donc, il va falloir à la fois respecter ce qu'on peut appeler le principe de subsidiarité, qui est chacun fait à sa manière et en fonction des traditions, des enjeux, de ce qu'on se donne à évaluer au niveau le plus local possible. Ça peut être le suivi des tortues, à un niveau vraiment, il y a des aires marines protégées qui n'en ont rien à faire du suivi des tortues. Donc, ça, c'est le principe de subsidiarité. Et puis, le savoir local, le savoir, les connaissances traditionnelles, donc avoir aussi. Et puis, à un niveau plus harmonisation, si on veut comparer et si on veut échanger les expériences, trouver quand même des choses, je rejoins ce que tu viens de dire, il faut quand même quelques indicateurs robustes communs à tout le monde pour qu'on puisse quand même pouvoir se parler, quoi. Donc, on va être dans cet enjeu-là. Et je voulais parler un petit peu de la capitalisation. Je fais de la pub, mais ça vient de sortir. On a sorti au FEFEM. On s'est dit, voilà, comment évaluer tout ce que le FEFEM a fait depuis 25 ans en appui à des aires marines protégées partout dans le monde, en Méditerranée beaucoup, mais dans le reste du monde aussi. Ça va, j'ai encore une minute. Et donc, l'idée, c'était de savoir qu'est-ce qu'on sort, non seulement en termes d'évaluation, mais en termes de capitalisation. Les leçons tirées des demi-succès, pour ne pas parler d'échecs, et puis des réussites, dans un souci à la fois de promouvoir les bonnes pratiques, les innovations, mais aussi de tirer des enseignements pour faire mieux, plus efficace. Donc, la première chose que j'ai... il y a beaucoup de choses dans ce document, et c'est classé par thématique. Vous avez la gestion pour une meilleure connaissance, pour une meilleure gestion d'aires marines protégées. Vous avez l'évaluation et la capitalisation autour de tous les projets d'économie bleue et de développement d'activités socio-économiques. Vous avez tout ce qui est évaluer le renforcement de capacité. Beaucoup de petits trucs. On part du très local, on part de petites initiatives. Mais moi, je retiendrai quand même un truc qui est dit en transversal à travers un petit peu tout ça, c'est trouver le temps de restituer auprès des populations locales et de restituer auprès de ceux que vous évaluez. C'est-à-dire très souvent, les évaluateurs passent, pondent un rapport ou font un petit film sympa et après, il n'y a pas de retour. Donc, si vous voulez associer les stakeholders, les parties prenantes et les gestionnaires et les populations qui vivent dans et autour des aires marines protégées, trouvez le temps de restituer. Ça peut être d'une façon très simple. Ça, c'est une grosse recommandation des auteurs qui ont fait ce travail. Et puis, je prendrai juste le temps il y a plein de recommandations, mais j'ai sorti celle-là. Et puis l'autre qui était, si je la retrouve, oui, de ne pas réinventer la roue. Il y a plein d'outils, il y a plein de systèmes de suivi qui ont été testés, éprouvés, mis en place. On parle de MapAmed, c'est vraiment bien, mais il y a des outils de suivi d'efficacité de gestion. Donc, essayons de ne pas réinventer un énième outil. Au contraire, faisons vivre ceux qui ont marché, améliorons-les éventuellement, mais il y a déjà beaucoup de choses qui existent. Merci.
Okay, thank you so much. Leonardo, would you care to go next? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 3 minutes, I think 2 main questions that should be how to engage and how to monitor the progress. And then I will try to answer starting from the point of view of the countries or parties of the Barcelona Convention. And I think that for the first question, the answer could be is directly in the concept of the 30 by 30. We are talking about post-2020 roadmap, but in fact, simplifying is 30 by 30. And then this means, in fact, considering not only the objectives of the CBD, but also as a Mediterranean European, we have the European strategy for the biodiversity for 2030 that have some main objectives, the 30% of protected areas, surfaces, 10% of strict protected, and particular importance is devoted to the restoration. And then these are a strong element important for the countries. And coming to the second question, and then for this reason, I think that the countries are directly involved in the implementation of these measures. And moving to the question about how to monitor. In fact, we have some system at Mediterranean level, MapMed, but at EU level, the CDDA, that is a common database on designated areas. And we are trying from many years to try to exploit these data sets to evaluate the efficacy of the management, the level of improvement of the different level, also at the different level. And we have seen that there is no, one main problem is related to the typology of information that are actually present in the system. And then an easy way, I think, to have the information is to modify, implement these systems, both CDDA that also feed MapMed, to define field of this database that are really useful to evaluate if there are strict protection, if there are real enforcement, if there are the presence of an effective management plan, and then there are series of fields that when we will have there, the country must, and then it is the problem after that, it is the country to implement. And I think that in this forum is very important to define in specificity which kind of information should be filled in these systems. And this is particularly true, I think, also for the other effective conservation measures, because in this system, till now, there is no field to fill. And now, as European, are involved working on to support the CDDA to define the best typology of information that could be foreseen in the system. And also for these reasons, it's very important to work all together to identify solutions that could be proposed, and then the implementation becomes theoretically more or less automatic. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, you've covered a lot of very important points that would need to be resolved. Susan wants to comment on some of that.
Yeah, sorry, it's not to comment.
Oh, wait, we're not hearing you, so wait. Okay.
Yeah, just maybe when we designed this session, because it's really great, all your feedback, but I'm trying to push you to really get what we need from you. So I'm sorry to intervene just now, but I think regarding MPA, we've got quite good tools just now to assess those, either in numbers with MapAmed, in quality, we're working on that with MedPAN. And we know how to reach the community of MPA, stakeholders. Our issue with this new roadmap is how we get all the other stakeholders involved. And we're talking also about OCM, about other, and how we engage them and how we report on those. Because just now, as Charles says, he couldn't assess the whole roadmap based on MapAmed and MedPAN database. So we've got a database on MPAs. We've got a database on some, knowledge of manager. It's not enough because we need information from other stakeholders, from other actors. How do we engage them? How do we get information from them? Do we need to try? Should we try? So just that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Just to compliment, I totally agree. But the problem is that, I don't know, thinking about the solution, the situation, the system that we have in Italy, the management of all the MPAs is in charge, in fact, to the Ministry of the Ecological Transition. And then if you define the correct typology of information to collect, the information will arrive. And then we have also, you will have also the involvement directly of the different typology of stakeholders. And then I think that this forum is very important to have the contribution of the stakeholder about the typology of information. And the stakeholders doesn't mean only fishermen, but also managers of MPA in particular, to have the suggestion about the typology of information that should be foreseen in the system. But I totally agree with you. It's just to try to simplify, but to be, using this, the potentiality of the system. If the implementation, for this reason, I said that I talk at the level of the country, because something must be implemented by the country, but always taking consideration all the different parts of the system, and the stakeholders are fundamental. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mustafa, please go ahead.
Right. I have quite different view about the whole things. Number one, do we need to monitor? Yeah. And if this is the case, how can you monitor something that's not yet approved? I mean, tomorrow, yes, we'll approve the roadmap, but next week you still have to go to Barcelona, and then in April you'll go to Coming, whatever, etc. So I think we are moving very fast. Having said that, what kind of monitoring that we are talking about? By whom, for example? What resources are available? How often that you can monitor? And for what? You monitor what? And who's going to do this? If in case of marine protected areas, for example, if the manager is going to do that, that will not be fair at all. Because in one hand, if you take GBF, for example, Global Biodiversity Framework, they give you very clear means of implementation. If you don't have financial resources, for example, you cannot monitor anything, for example, if you don't have capacity building and so on. So we need to be a little bit careful in the whole process. And at the same time, we need to be very, very, I would say, kind to some extent on those people who are going to monitor, because they have to do many, many things at the same time. Monitoring indicators, monitoring objectives, strategic objectives, monitoring specific action, that will complicate things. At the same time, you need to think about what format of monitoring. And it's going to be at national level, at regional level, at global level. I mean, from our experience in Egypt, for example, when we prepared the 6th national report, we have a section about your achievement. What have you done? So you have to speak very, freely on all the issues and all constraints and problems, using all the indicators, whatever. But once you say this is our achievement, then they ask you very specific how this, what you have done, is contributing to the global issue. So in one hand, you look at the issue at national, and then you go to that next level, whether it's regional, or the global, whatever. So we need to be a little bit soft on those people that I feel very sorry. Although I believe in monitoring, if you don't monitor anything that you have approved, then things will be, I mean, take the latest things. I mean, Corona, for example, issue. Everyone sit at home doing what? Except eating and putting weight and being lazy, whatever. How can I monitor pandemic issues, for example? And the same thing. Well, I'm doing that, and then if everything's approved, and then if all of the resources are available, whether it's human, whether capacity, whether, and then you come with something like pandemic. If it continue like this, what am do I have plan B, for example, during pandemic, what I'm supposed to do? No one will go to the MBA, for example. This is what we have learned. Once a pandemic started, people deserted all MBAs, for example, because they were very scared and they didn't know what to do. Things like that. But certainly, from my point of view, again, monitoring is essential, but I think you have to take it easy. You wait until all things are very clear, and then you can harmonize means of implementation of GBS with the Barcelona Convention, and then you go to the MPA. That will make it simple in a way that you could say who's responsible for that. But at the same time, you could say, okay, it is governmental, but if the government don't have anyone to report to you, so what will happen if you don't report? Is it going to be mandatory, or it is going to be binding? Personally, I feel the 8 questions that you give 3 for each one of us, that means that we are talking about 24 minutes. I could add another 20 questions and then we'll never end. But certainly the issue of monitoring is very important, but wait for a while until things become clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mustafa. By the way, we will have time for more responses from you all. I just wanted to start with 3 minutes. Okay, so, but thank you for those comments. That's very useful. Basically, you're suggesting we like monitoring, but the reality of monitoring is that it's a lot of work for people to fill in forms, and they always resist. Our friends at MedPAN can attest to how difficult it is to get a lot of this data out of people, but they do eventually do it, many of them, most of them, with the right incentives. Okay, so let's hear from Imen, please.
So following on this trend that has been happening, and I thank you for your question, Charles, because I think they are very pertinent, and particularly the very first one, because hearing the presentations on the sessions, both of them, and some of the comments, I think we're starting to mix apples and oranges in terms of what are we talking about and in terms of what's monitoring. And sometimes I feel in these sessions, we're talking about things because we have to talk about them. We're talking about monitoring, well, because there is a roadmap and therefore we need to have a monitoring of roadmap. But I think it is important that we stop and ask the very first question that you have asked. Should we have a monitoring framework or mechanism? And I would ask, for what? Following on Dr. Futa, why do you want to have it? If we're going to be monitoring the target and the progress towards the target, that process is under the Barcelona Convention, and we should not mix 2 monitoring frameworks for the same purpose. That's extremely confusing, not only to countries, but also to stakeholders. So that's a process that's underway, that may be taking a little longer, but that's the process, and we need to be respectful of that. If we need to monitor the roadmap, then my begging question is why and what for? And we have to be very clear about the relationship of the roadmap to the strategy, because the roadmap is supposed to be a tool to help implement the strategy. And therefore, what are you going to be monitoring? I think one of the questions would be to monitor the success of the roadmap in supporting the implementation of the strategy. That would be an interesting question, and seeing indicators for that. To your question as to what level, do we need to have indicators tied to each action? Definitely no. That's a lot of wasted efforts to absolutely nothing. Do we need to have impacts indicators? Yes, but I would say also for the overall purpose of the roadmap, has it enabled support for their implementation? Has it been successful in engaging the stakeholders that we did not that? But you're not going to get to that through every action and every strategic objective as currently the roadmap is structured. And I think it is important to see some of the questions that you have here. Can we engage the stakeholders in contributing data to monitor the targets and the various aspects of the target is an important question. But should that be under monitoring framework, or should that be an action within the roadmap as it continues to support the implementation? That would be a more appropriate way to frame that. And lastly, on the Pacific example that was presented, I think it's important for us to clarify. You can say, well, here's another framework. That's a very structured framework. The SPC is a membership organization. You have members who have made, that's a monitoring framework for an implementation plan that's extremely structured with detailed actions that are committed by each of the members. It's not the same structure that we have here with an open-ended roadmap with undefined actors that are contributing to it. And I really think that we shouldn't be doing things because, well, they're sexy and we need to do them, but ask the question, for what and for what purpose? And take a moment to stop for that. So I'll pass to my neighbor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bon, je n'ai vraiment pas beaucoup de choses à dire après tout ce qui a été dit. Alors moi, je vais plutôt parler de l'objectif de ce roadmap. Ce roadmap est mis en place principalement pour la préservation de la biodiversité à l'échelle mondiale, en Méditerranée particulièrement, et pour les deux rives. Et nous, la Tunisie, on a eu la chance de participer à la majorité des réunions lors de l'élaboration de la feuille de route. Et nous avons vu que ça nécessite également un important apport en moyens humains et en moyens financiers. Donc, la contribution qu'on pourrait nous faire, c'est de ne pas baisser les bras, de continuer à préserver les aires marines et côtières qu'on a en Tunisie, d'en créer d'autres et surtout de bien gérer pour préserver et conserver. Voilà, donc je ne vais pas rajouter beaucoup de choses. Merci à tous.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Samia. Let's come back. Constance, do you have anything that you wanted to add? I know we cut people off after 3 minutes. So anything else you'd like to share now that you've heard the other panelists? Or I should have asked Laura first because she went first. Please.
I don't have much to add, but I think what you said was very important. In fact, why we want to do that, what for, is the objective to improve conservation status of our habitat, species, or ecosystems, Is it to address impacts, or both? Is it to see what's the health of our MPAs? So, yeah, really, I think considering all that we said, we see that it's your questions are very tricky. We don't really know how to answer them, but I think we shouldn't maybe base more our reflection also on sharing experiences, continue to do that, because I think that's the power of this network, sharing experiences at different levels, making sure that good ideas are known and well known, and also maybe in terms of monitoring, what I think is, or engagement, what I think is important is to find key features that can speak to everybody, that a kid can understand, a maritime prefect can understand, or a ministry or whatever. When we were working on the regulation of mooring in Posidonia, we define some key features like that. Like when you say to a prefect, one yacht mooring in Post-2020 destroys the equivalent of the surface of a court or of a soccer field, then he understands. Because if not, it doesn't see what's the impact really. So if we have communication tools also to show what are the effects of our activities on our environment, I think it can, make people think and make people see what, in fact, they can do about it. So communication, I think, is also important to share.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura. Let me just give Susan a chance to respond to some of these issues that were mentioned a little earlier. We're still waiting for your microphone. Oh.
Thank you all. I'm going to try and answer your question, Iman, and just a point of view in all the discussion we had that bring us here today. And I think we're here today because when we were carrying out the assessment, that we do to prepare the forum, we've got a good assessment, or as much as we can, regarding MPA status, but between SPARAC and MedPAN, to address that roadmap regarding MPA and MPA centered. But the roadmap and the forum is more than that. During the forum, we tried to involve more actors. We tried to bring, a whole community into that. And while we're good with our experience and our expertise between MedPAN and SPARAC to reach and exchange with the MPA community, and then with the focal point regarding, country-wise, those MPA targets, because these are, our expertise, we don't reach out to all these other stakeholders, like fishermen were mentioned, also like more generally NGOs, local population, maybe economic actors. During this event we manage, we have specific session, we have a specific case study, we bring them, they hear, it's great, and we need them. We need them to address MPA challenge. And we're talking about commitment coming from these other actors to try and bring them to this process. And the whole, evaluation mechanism, it's not about MPA, like by MPA actors. We working on that, we can. It's how we get everyone into that process. And can we do it? So the question is still here. Can we do it, But ideally, if we manage to involve them every 4 years, how we keep them into the process? Can we have some kind of voluntary commitment and then an evaluation on this voluntary commitment that would keep them, this dynamic? So in 4 years, we're not in the same situation. Did we really manage to talk to these economic actors during these 4 years? Did we really manage to get those fishermen on board?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Susan. Sure, yeah.
Okay. I don't disagree with that, but that's a different question. And I think what we need to be very clear is about the objective. What we have today is a roadmap that has specific objectives that are more about, how do we reach the 2030, that are somehow, sometimes in connections, sometimes in disconnections with what we have under the strategy. Let's recognize that. And then what you have, an additional objective in the forum, is how to bring that community. I think the question that we should ask, and that's the added value that I see for the forum and for the various actors, is can we engage more stakeholders in an effective way to contribute to the target? That is a very valid question. And if your roadmap is to enable that, then it should be structured slightly differently, because that was not the purpose for the roadmap. But if you want to put that as the objective of what we need to evaluate, then that would be a very valid question. Should we have an impact indicator, or how can we think about evaluating how effective we are in engaging the various stakeholders in contributing to that? I mean, you're starting a process of commitment and tracking commitment, that's great. But from the list, and that's going to be in plenary, from the initial list that I've seen, because we're making commitment, it's mainly conservation actors still. So, do we want to have specific indicators of how effective are we in engaging other stakeholders in specific actions that are targeted to that? Then that would be a very valid question. And so I totally agree with you, but let's be very clear about the what.
Yeah. Just to note that there are some specific recommendations that are about stakeholder engagement in the roadmap. So there's a direct tie to what you're saying, and developing an indicator around that would help to accomplish what you're saying. But what you're saying is at a much sort of higher level of how we should think about monitoring the forum and the roadmap and how it all comes together. So yeah, great points. Thank you. I want to open it up also to the audience. Gaetan, if you can come forward and grab oh, you have a comment too? Go ahead while we're waiting for Gaetan to get his microphone. Can you turn the green microphone on, please? Yeah, now the red one.
Yeah,
the green.
thank you. The green one,
Yeah.
Tribord. I understand what you said about it's not an evaluation of MPA efficiency, it's not evaluation at that level. However, if you ask a fisherman, a scientist, a donor, MedPAN staff, and everybody there, the objective of the evaluation and the monitoring of this roadmap would be different. So I think at what point you have to be a decisioner and you say, that is what I want to monitor, because you will have as many answers as categories of stakeholders. Second, contribution versus attribution of what happens will be a key point. You may have climate change crisis, you may have, I don't know, let's hope not, but a big natural catastrophe such as oil and gas catastrophe. So what do you put as attribution and contribution to the realization of the, so I think this has to be thought about. And that thing, I think we always think in static terms, whereas the dynamic, and I remember Catherine Piant during the opening session, she mentioned that we have definitely to change our paradigm, I don't know how to say in English, if we want to reach this 30% in Mediterranean. So how do you monitor the dynamic of the change? And if you look at the tree during winter time, at least in our countries, you don't see a lot of what happens because it's only through roots, and a lot of what is happening for the next spring is at the under the ground level. So if you just take a photo of a tree during winter time, you have nothing, but you have to catch the movement, the change movement that is going. I know it's not to simplify your task, and I am very happy to be not at your place, but I think you have also to have this in mind if you want to catch what happens during these 4 years.
Yeah, thank you. Gaetan, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
C'est bon. Je vais parler en français. Donc, bon, pour moi, hein, ce mécanisme de suivi-évaluation, on a une roadmap avec 6 objectifs. Sous chaque objectif, on a des recommandations. Pour chaque recommandation, on va avoir des indicateurs qu'on a commencé à définir dans les sessions. Chaque indicateur va être assorti de cibles, logiquement. L'idée de mon point de vue, hein, l'idée de ce système de suivi-évaluation doit permettre d'alimenter la réflexion de renouvellement de la roadmap dans 4 ans, en 2024-2025, lorsque la prochaine session du forum sera organisée, et de ne pas être dans la situation où tu étais il y a quelques mois, sans vraiment de données disponibles pour évaluer où on se situe par rapport à la roadmap précédente. Donc, l'objectif de ce système doit vraiment permettre d'être, dans 4 ans, en 2024, OK, voilà où on a réussi à se rendre pour chaque recommandation, pour chaque objectif, quelle cible on a atteint, et sur cette base-là, est-ce que certaines recommandations doivent être renouvelées pour les 4 années suivantes ou pas? Si elles sont atteintes, on passe à autre chose. Donc ça, c'était mon premier point. Le deuxième point, c'était d'un point de vue ressources, parce que mettre en place un système de suivi et évaluation, ça a un coût. Ça ne se fait pas comme ça du jour au lendemain. Et je pense que un des intervenants l'a mentionné. Et j'introduis la session suivante. Donc, dans le projet de Jeff, MedPAN, que l'on vient de terminer de designer, qui va être approuvé au début d'année prochaine, l'un des outputs porte sur la mise en place de systèmes de suivi et évaluation en préambule de la prochaine session du forum en 2024-2025. Donc, les ressources financières pour définir ce système de suivi et évaluation sont déjà intégrées dans un projet et seront disponibles en 2022 pour définir ce système. Après, voir comment il sera participatif, voir comment on fait contribuer les différents interlocuteurs. Mais il y a des ressources financières qui sont déjà dispo pour le définir et le mettre en œuvre, en fait.
Thank you, Gaëtan. Yep, very good points. As usual, we don't have enough time because the sessions are only an hour and a half long, and we could have talked about this for a lot longer. I found this a very interesting discussion, and we had some differing opinions. We had some alignment with opinions. And I hope, Susan and Souha, you got some important information from the panel to help moving forward. I certainly did, as I'll be asked to draft this road ahead section. So we have some more discussions to be had. I did have a question on the panel here, the process moving forward. And we started to talk about that a little bit. I think there's a lot more discussion that needs to be had. If we're going to do this, then what is the process? Certainly, we're not doing that here at this meeting. It would require a lot more discussion in the future to figure out what are those key issues and how we want a monitoring system to guide us in the future. Is it just to help us develop a roadmap and evaluate it, or does it serve a much wider purpose to help serve all of the organizations working in the Mediterranean to achieve the targets, achieve all of their goals, not just the specific recommendations in this? So there's some big questions in all of that. We're at the end of our time. I want to respect the time so that we can get on our buses and get to our next session. So I'd like to thank the panel and the audience and the presenters. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions.